Welcome everyone. I have a very interesting video here for you all today because I'm going to talk about and shed light on the incredible history that ancient Israel has in the Bible, where they would go off and fight wars against giants. They would defeat them, conquer them, and even exterminate them. And Almighty God was commanding them to do this and was even helping them through incredible and even miraculous ways. There's many places in the Bible where Israel did these great wars. In fact, the majority of the wars and the genocides that Israel did and committed against other tribes and nations were actually against giants. I think this whole topic of giants and such, this hidden history, is so interesting. And I really think that Israel should get credit for all the great magnificent wars they did in defeating these monstrous titans and giants. They even fought titans. That's correct. The massive ones, the 400-foot tall ones. So, in this video, I have some really interesting verses from the Bible that show you the size, the power of these giants. Some of these verses are obscure ones that most people haven't come across yet. So hopefully this will be very interesting to you all. Now, most of us have heard about Goliath. Most of us have heard about King Og, maybe even the Anakim and Nephilim. But that's about where the average person, stops in terms of their knowledge. But there are countless tribes of giants in the Bible, probably over a dozen. Many, many individual giants as well that people just haven't really heard about, but they're there. Now, I'm not going to really get into the Nephilim thing or Goliath, because that's a common topic. But one thing about Goliath that some people don't know is that he actually had brothers. I can't remember how many, maybe 5 brothers in total, and they all had 6 fingers, 6 toes. Now, Goliath and his brothers are around 10 feet tall, but this would make somebody extremely powerful. And it says that he was one of the last, and his brothers were some of the last giants in Gath. That was just one city. Now, about King Og, it says that he was of the remnant of the last ones where he was. He might have even been the last of his kind where he was. And he was roughly 11 or 12 feet tall. Now, a lot of other people don't know about King Sihon. King Sihon was around 15 to 18 feet tall. He was larger than King Og. And he was also defeated by Moses, I think it was. I think Sihon and Og were conquered in the same battle. But these are like the more common things that people hear about. I have one very interesting verse here with King David fighting some giants. And it's in 2 Samuel 12, verse 26. And it says that Joab is fighting against Rabbah of the Bnei Ammon and captures the royal city. Bnei Ammon means the sons of Ammon. So these were Ammonites. Okay, so the Ammonites are giants. Okay? And Joab sendeth messengers unto David, and saith, I have fought against Rabbah, and I have captured the city of waters. And now gather the rest of the people, and encamp against the city, and capture it, lest I capture the city, and my name has been called upon it. And David gathered all the people, and goes to Rabbah, and fighteth against it, and captureth it. And he taketh the crown of their king from off his head, and its weight is a talent of gold, and precious stones, and it is on the head of David, and the spoil of the city he has brought out very much. Now, you have to realize how heavy a talent of gold is. This will give you an idea of how large and powerful these giants were. Okay, and it could likely be that the king was perhaps the largest giant, but still. Okay, a talent of gold is roughly 70 pounds. Some sources say 65, some say 75. But an average 70 pounds. Now, one of the grandest and heaviest crowns that we know about today is the Royal Crown of Britain. Now currently it only weighs like 2.2 pounds, and this is because Queen Elizabeth had to have the size and weight reduced because it was simply too heavy. The original weight that the king, I think King George, originally wore was 4.9 pounds, so basically a 5-pound crown. And it's so heavy you can't really tip your head forward because it would really hurt your neck, especially if it's fixed on your head. So for a crown to be 70 pounds, this gives you an idea of how large and powerful that giant was. Now, it's not directly proportional height to strength, okay? There's a bell curve. If you're a 6-foot person or a 5-foot person, someone who is 7.5, 8 feet tall is only 50% larger than you, but they can be over twice as strong as you. So there is a bell curve. So somebody who can wear a 70-pound crown, it doesn't necessarily mean that the person's going to be like 75 or 80 feet tall. That would make them very skinny and gangly. But for someone to be strong and proportional and powerful, they would probably be around 20 to 30 feet tall, just roughly speaking. Now, we know King David was not a giant, because when he fought Goliath, he was a diminutive human compared to Goliath. And Goliath was a small giant at like 10 feet tall. Okay, so we know David wasn't a giant. So he was probably having the crown held up or mounted on something, and he put his head into it underneath, if you know what I mean. There's no way that he could put that on his head. He wasn't Superman. And even if he was Superman, his head is way too small for that crown. So this just gives you an idea of the size. And these were the Ammonites. And in verse 31 it goes on to say how they exterminated them. And it's quite barbaric, but this is all part of, karma. Eye for an eye. They did this to others, and it was happening back to them. That's just what God decreed. It says, and the people who are in it, means that town, he, King David, is brought out, and setteth to the saw, and to cutting instruments of iron, and to axes of iron, and has caused them to pass over into the brick kiln, the thing that heats bricks. And so he does to all the cities of the sons of Ammon, the Ammonites. And David turneth back, and all the people, to Jerusalem. So that's a very interesting passage. Again, that's 2 Samuel 12. Now in Amos 2:9 it says, and I have destroyed the Amorite from before them, whose height is as the height of cedars, and strong he is as the oaks, and I destroy his fruit from above, and his roots from beneath. Now one thing I noticed when doing my Bible study, especially in terms of giants, is that King Og and his peoples were compared to oak trees. Now it's probably due to the size, the girth, and the strength of oak. And we see the Amorites are compared to cedars. Cedars, I believe, are typically taller, much bigger than oak trees. I could be wrong, but I think so. But in either case, cedars, these types of pines and everything, they can range 70 feet tall. Okay, and some of them even taller. Certain pine trees, which many other peoples around the world, such as Native Americans, they say the tallest giants are as tall as the tallest pine trees, which is like 200 feet, over 100 to 200 feet. So we see here that the Amorites were the height of the cedars. And this makes sense because depictions of the Amorites and the Baals, who were the gods of the Amorites and so many other nations, they are depicted as being the height of cedar trees, and uprooting the cedar trees by their bare strength and using them as walking sticks or clubs. Okay, so that's quite incredible. And those are the Amorites. In Joshua 9, it has a few names of the giant tribes. It says, and it cometh to pass, when all the kings who are beyond the Jordan, in the hill country, and in the low country, and in every haven of the great sea over against Lebanon, the Hittite, and the Amorite, the Canaanite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite, hear. And they gather themselves together to fight with Joshua and with Israel one mouth. This again is a great war against tribes of giants. Now Canaanites, I do believe a lot of Canaanites were people, but it's also possible that Canaanites had mixed with giants. Okay, the Hittites were large. They might not have been massive giants, but they were large people. The Amorites, as we know, were giants, some of them up to 30 feet tall, especially their kings and their great warriors. The Perizzites were giants, I'm not certain of the size, as with the Hivites and the Jebusites. And they're mentioned elsewhere in the Bible as well. In verse 10 it says, and all that he has done to the two kings of the Amorite, who are beyond the Jordan, to King Sihon of Heshbon, and to Og, king of Bashan, who is in Ashtaroth, proclaiming their defeat of these great giant kings, again, who are Amorites. In Joshua 10 verse 5 it says, and 5 kings of the Amorite, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, the king of Eglon, notice there it says Jerusalem, are gathered together and go up, they and all their camps, in a camp against Gibeon, and fight against it. This is a great battle that took place between the giants and the Israelites with Joshua. Now, I'll mention now before I forget, beyond the Jordan is always mentioned in these verses because this was the promised land. Okay, and the promised land, as we know with the Anakim case, was inhabited by these titans and giants, and Israel was told by God that they had to defeat them, conquer them, and wipe them out. Okay, if they wouldn't bow down to Almighty God in Israel, then they would be wiped out. Okay, and they had to go out and do this. Now the Anakim's another topic I'll get into later, right? But we see that same pattern all the time. So this land beyond the Jordan was heavily inhabited by giants, and that's quite interesting. And in verse 8 it says, And Jehovah saith unto Joshua, Be not afraid of them, for into thy hand I have given them, and there does not stand a man of them in thy presence. And in verse 10 it says, And Jehovah does crush them before Israel, and it smiteth them, a great smiting at Gibeon, and pursueth them the way of the ascent of Beth-horon, and smiteth them unto Azekah, and unto Makkedah. And it cometh to pass, in their fleeing from the face of Israel, they are in the descent of Beth-horon, and Jehovah has cast upon them great stones out of the heavens, unto Azekah, and they die. More are they who have died by the hailstones, than they whom the sons of Israel have slain by the sword. And it goes on to say in verse 13, I just don't want to keep reading everything, And the sun standeth still, and the moon has stood, till the nation taketh vengeance on its enemies. Is it not written in the book of the upright? Okay, so this was the great time. Miracles are being done. These great hailstones, this is the time the sun stood still. These were giants that the Israelites were fighting here. And that is incredible. God was doing miracles to help eliminate the giants. Now in Joshua 24, verse 11, we hear about another miraculous time that similar things are taking place. And it says, Ye pass over the Jordan, and come in unto Jericho, and fight against you do the possessors of Jericho, the Amorite, and the Perizzite, and the Canaanite, and the Hittite, and the Girgashite, another tribe of giants, the Hivite, and the Jebusite, and I give them into your hand. And I send before you the hornet, and it casteth them out from your presence, 2 kings of the Amorite, not by the sword, nor by thy bow. Okay, God was sending these hornets to kill the giants. Another miraculous intervention by God. These were no mere regular-sized hornets or bees. Okay, these were massive giant size. We have to remember that the land of the giants, when the spies went to go investigate, this was where the Anakim were. This land not just had giant people, it had giant trees, giant plants, giant grapevines. One cluster of grapes was so large and heavy, it took men and a staff to carry it. That's how huge it was. Okay, and Jewish writings say that the pomegranates in the land of the Anakim were large enough where a couple people could stand in it like a cave, like the hollowed out shell of the pomegranate. It would be like the size of a small hut. This is huge, and this is the promised land where milk and honey would flow in rivers. Okay, and all the things that were huge. This is the land that God wanted the Israelites to inhabit. Now, if you're going to have rivers of honey, it would make sense that there were giant bees, giant hornets, making this, giant hives with giant honeycombs that are just so big, so much honey drips out, it makes these rivers. That would just make a lot more sense, because rivers of honey and milk otherwise don't make sense. Also, if there are large cows, a lot of the mythologies around the world say that the giants had giant animals as well, like giant cows that they would milk, giant horses that they would ride, giant wolves. In Norse mythology, Native American, around the world in virtually every culture. In Hinduism, they go into great detail about this and say that these giants had these great cows and they would milk them. And when cows are ripe, milk drops from their teats. So when you have giant cows standing together in this giant herd, and all their teats are flowing because it's time for them, to produce milk, it would form rivers, like torrents of raging milk in the ground, upon the ground. And this is what the promised land was. It was the land of these giants with these giant creatures. It's pretty incredible. And in the verses where it talks about the Anakim, it says that their cities were walled up to the heavens. The walls were so tall that they would go up to the sky. You couldn't see the top of them. Okay, and the Anakim were Titan-sized. They were around 400 feet tall, the large ones. Okay, that's pretty massive. So you can get an idea of how tall the walls were. They were probably 400 to 900 feet tall. It's like those really tall buildings in Dubai. But that tall, but a wall. Like, that's pretty insane. And that's what the Israelites had to go up and fight against. And they cowered at first. They were afraid, and the spies got rebuked by God for their fear, because God told them that He would miraculously aid them in defeat. So I might make a part 2, because there's some more verses I could go through. And I really hope you enjoyed this, and thank you for watching.